Hello and welcome to lecture number 22 of this series. And the observant among you will notice several things. Number one, my braces are back because it's cool enough to wear braces. Braces are surprisingly warm, actually. And the second thing is I am sitting in a very comfortable chair instead of my usual tonnet wicker chair because I have a back problem. So if you see me wince during the video, it's because some nerve unrelated to olfaction is being pinched. So the topic today is animalic fragrances, animalic materials and animalic fragrances. And as a sort of type example of the animalic fragrance, I chose Chanel's Cuir de Russie, Russian leather, composed in 1924 by Ernest Beau, the same perfumer who did Chanel 5. And well, it's pretty divine actually. It's the most extraordinary how these great perfumes of the past managed to be both complicated and at the same time legible. You can do complicated, and many people these days, especially some of the niche perfumers, are doing super complicated pile-ups of rich animalic, woody, etc. materials, musky, but somehow what you end up with is a huge cloud that doesn't actually say anything much, really. Whereas these guys, I don't know, they were using great materials, but they had a very clear structure in mind. This is a phenomenal perfume. It is what I would describe as animalic. Technically, it's a leather, as its name indicates. There have been hundreds of leather perfumes. In fact, many of them actually called Cuir de Russie, strangely enough. I don't think they own the name. And the leather note is really defined rather ambiguously as a mixture between a proper warm, what I would describe as a brown smell. I don't know how to describe it any better than that. Brown, you recognize it when you smell it. It's the smell. Sometimes you bring up, I don't know, a cat or a dog or something up to your nose, and there's a nice skin oil fur thing, brown. So leather is partly brown and partly bitter, and the bitterness, I believe, comes from whatever is used in tanning the skin to make the leather. So leather fragrances are animalic, definitely, but they also have this added element of the isoquinolines, which were introduced a little bit later, actually, than in Cuir de Russie, which give a very intensely bitter, inky note, which is delightful. But the true animalic notes are actually few and far between. And there is ambergris, which smells incredible. I mean, ambergris is such a complicated smell that almost anything you say about it is wrong. It's everything. It's seaweed. It's animalic. It's fresh. It's just insanely complex. And the reason it's complex is its composition is very complex. It's not used very much in perfumery, and not least because it's enormously expensive. And for some reason, it's not very much in fashion, actually. I mean, a perfume with a big ambergris note up front could, in principle, be made and sold, but at a price. But it's not very fashionable. And the third one would be civet. And civet really is an animalic note, but it's an almost unpleasant. It really smells like stale urine. I mean, it smells of amines, it smells of all sorts of really catty, unpleasant things. Remarkably, when you mix it into a fragrance, all that just goes away, all is forgiven, and it works fantastically well in compositions. Some compositions, like for example Serge Lutin's Musk's Kublai Khan, had so much civet up front. When I first smelled it, I thought, this will never sell. But typically, civet goes down with time in the bottle. And so they become civilized florals or whatever, given time. I'm not going to, I don't have any civet or ambergris here because there's no real point. I'm sticking to the kit that Spiros made for Perfumer's Apprentice. So the first truly animalic material, and probably the only one that I would really describe as properly speaking animalic, I have here is castorium, which this is, I believe, a castorium reconstruction. In other words, a base. It's called Castorium Blend IFF. It may contain some actual castorium. So, wow, that is good. That is really good. Delicious. So, what is castorium? Well, it's a genuinely animal product. It comes from a gland that beavers have near their anus. They actually have two different types of glands. One which secretes pheromones, kind of not unlike the musk glands of the musk deer, and the other one which secretes or contains, at any rate, this stuff called castorium, and it's quite a big gland. And when beavers are killed, the glands are used to make perfumery material. So if you do the chemical analysis of castorium, it's full of phenols, meaning benzene rings with an OH or sometimes two attached to the ring. And those are smoky notes, but the actual smell of castorium is only in part smoky. There's a definite smoky angle, but there's also something else, something more, slightly more bitter, and also, again, a sort of animalic, warm, sweet aspect to it, which is what makes it really pleasant as opposed to simply smoky or bitter. This thing has a richness and a complexity that's really, really impressive and very beautiful. It's clear when you smell this. You know, unlike musk, where, quite honestly, sometimes when you smell real natural musk, you think, well, yeah, it's not bad, but why would you spend so much money to put it in a perfume? Of course, the answer is it works spectacularly in perfume, but this is definitely a great smell. And the glands are called castor glands. Castor in French is actually the name for beavers. And it was used, and it's still used, either the natural or synthetic form, very widely in perfumery. And it gives a tremendously long-lasting, rich, warm hum. If I had to compare it in terms of music, I would say this would be like the tubas or something, or the bassoons, even better. Yeah, the bassoons and the contrabassoons of the orchestra. It's warm, and it's absolutely phenomenal material. I sincerely hope, I'm very fond of beavers. I think they're wonderful animals. I very much hope that in future no beavers are ever harmed to get the castorium out, but it is a great smell. So the second material here I'm going to talk about is called pyrrolone, and it's actually a compound that I mentioned earlier, the quinolines, which are part of the leather composition. And quinolines are a very interesting smell because the quinolines have two benzene rings with nitrogens, and they're remarkably, they're both penetrating and remarkably soft and friendly. I mean, compared to pyridines and pyrazines and other heterocycles, you know, 5 or 6 membered rings with a nitrogen, they actually have even within the pure molecule, which I believe this is, the pure molecule itself has a floral, almost, and fruity sort of, a little bit like the amides, a sort of a warm horse fur feel to it. And so this is really a very strongly distinctive leather material, so it's classed as an animalic, even though you may or may not, when first smelling it, I would say people would definitely say, smells of horses, so that qualifies as animalic. It was used to phenomenal effect in Germaine Cellier's famous Bandit fragrance, which I believe was 1947. And in the case of Germaine Cellier, it was a tremendous contrast between this bitterness and a rather civilized, friendly, soft base. So it was basically a very nice person who could easily slap you in the face. I must say, Bandit, even now, is one of my favorite fragrances of all time. So the third animalic ingredient I want to talk about today is a weird molecule which comes actually in a variety of different forms and compositions, etc., which is indole. Indole is a very fundamental component of proteins in the form of an amino acid called tryptophan. And when you break down tryptophan and break down proteins with decay, when an animal dies, a lot of indole is released. Indole and scatol are considered animalic, partly because of this association with animal decay or animal waste products. But in reality, the place where you really find them in their proper use, so to speak, by evolutionary speaking, is flowers, white flowers, jasmine, for example. If you walk around here in Athens, you walk around in the evening, and there's big jasmine bushes everywhere, the amount of indole that those things are releasing is absolutely incredible. It's only because we are, in a way, primed to perceive the mixture of indole and benzyl acetate as meaning jasmine, that we don't say, "Whoa, that smells of shit," because actually it kind of does. Incidentally, while I'm on this subject, I want to really lodge a complaint against people who describe odors in learned books, because they say to you, when they come to the chapter indole, they will say strong fecal odor, floral in dilution. That's just wrong and stupid. It's not a fecal odor, floral in dilution. It doesn't smell floral at any concentration. It smells like fecal, only less and less. I mean, you know, just more distant excrement. Okay? So it's the fact that it's used not in dilution but in composition that makes it floral. So the fifth material, which I'm going to talk about today of the animalic series, is, mysteriously, Cashmeran, which I don't fully understand why it even falls in the animalic category. I've seen Cashmeran classified as animalic, as musky, and it has a distinct musky aspect, there's no question. But really, This is such a peculiar smell that it almost deserves a category all by itself. It's a smell. I mean, if you imagine a musk smell, which is that sort of slightly grey, nondescript, smooth, sweet thing, and then you add the smell of wet concrete, like a garage. You know, you drive down into a recently built parking lot or garage, and you get that smell of stone. And Cashmeran, it really is like that. And people love Cashmeran. I personally don't find it particularly attractive, but people love Cashmeran. It's very much used in modern compositions because it has, in addition to the musky aspect, a dry thing, which musks don't. Musks tend towards sweetness. Cashmeran absolutely does not. Now, one of the peculiar things about Cashmeran is that the sensitivity to it varies a lot between people. I don't know that I've never come across somebody who cannot smell Cashmeran, whereas, of course, it's very common for people not to be able to smell one musk or another. But a Cashmeran anosmia, as it's called, is quite rare. However, I've come across perfumers who have a hyposmia to Cashmeran. They smell it less than the rest of us. And therefore, they tend to put an absolute ton of the stuff in the composition. And unless they have an evaluator who doesn't have the same hyposmia, their perfumes come out smelling completely weird. And I remember I had this discussion with a well-known French perfumer, very, very good perfumer, who has this hyposmia. And she showed me once one of her creations. And I said, you know, it's terrific, but my God, you know, how much Cashmeran did you put in there? She said, oh, same thing happens every time. You know, I have to, when I start showing it to people, I have to divide the dose by 5 for it to work. So she was aware of it, but she got it to the point where it smelled good to her, but for it to smell good to everyone else, she had to reduce it by a large factor. So this is a very interesting molecule. That particular aspect is very unusual. And the sixth and last of the animalic series I want to talk about today is Ambroxan. Ambroxan crystals is what it's called. And really at this point we are drifting away completely from where we started out, which was castorium, which really does smell like a furry animal. This thing is a divine, clean, magnificent smell. It's a solid, so I don't need a smelling strip. But the only connection it has to the animal world is rather remote. It's it or a closely related molecule is contained in ambergris, and ambergris comes out of whales, and therefore this is considered animalic. In fact, it's not an animalic smell per se, it's just an originally animalic material. What does it smell of? It smells actually ambery. I mean, it smells like, if you can imagine a woody amber without the bad news, is the best way I can describe it. But that wouldn't be, it would be neither, it wouldn't be woodier or amberier. It's just a soft, infinitely pleasant, fresh, subtle, magnificent smell. There's really, I'm going to try and put some on my skin because I want to smell it better. These crystals, all the materials which come as solids, of course it takes a while to really, if I was a chemist who'd figured out how to make this, I would be so proud of myself. It's not an easy molecule to make. In fact, for a long time, it was very expensive. Then I think 30 or 40 years of 24/7 work by the people, mostly at Firmenich, brought the synthesis, improved it, and brought the price down to where you find it everywhere. It really, it's a unique smell. It sits in a tiny, tiny territory between wood, woody amber, and musk, a sort of no man's land, which must be the size of a penny in odor space. And it's one of the best smells on the face of the earth.